4X games fulfill the fantasy of founding a mighty empire, exploiting its resources and constructing a large and technologically advanced military force for crushing your enemies in battle. Sins of a Solar Empire 2 built on the strong foundations laid by Sin's Rebellion and takes the combat simulation to the next level, increasing the detail and tactical depth available to players without bloating the game with overcomplexity or unnecessary features. The combat mechanics in Sins 2 are designed so that new players can jump straight into the game and play away without having to worry too much about the fine detail at first, while allowing more advanced players to have fun carefully composing their forces to take advantages of weaknesses identified in the fleet composition of their enemies. Fleet composition, positioning and manoeuvre are all critically important to achieving victory in battle. Ships in Sins of a Solar Empire 2 are roughly comprised of defensive and offensive weapon systems for sustaining and inflicting damage, and a method of propulsion which gives them acceleration, a top speed and turning rate for manoeuvring around the battlefield. In this video, we're going to discuss the underlying mechanics behind the defensive and offensive weapon systems available in the game, and the way they interact in combat. Armed with this knowledge, you'll be able to outwit and outmatch your opponents even when you're outnumbered. We'll start with a look at the composition of a ship's defensive systems, and how they work to mitigate incoming damage and keep that ship in the fight. When a ship takes incoming fire, if it has shields, these will usually be depleted first. These are a form of hit points. Stronger shields have more points and take longer to deplete than smaller shield systems. Some ships, such as trader corvettes, frigates and cruisers, won't start the game with shields, with each class gaining them through its own tech on the research tree. The Advent generally have the strongest shielding technology in the game. With the exception of the Vasari, shields generally do not regenerate until the ship is out of combat, so retreating ships with completely depleted shields may be a wise move. There are some exceptions to this, however. The Advents have access to shield burst technology. When their shields are completely depleted, they will be regenerated after a timer fully counts down to 0. This keeps shield burst enabled ships in the fight longer in a cyclical manner, but be aware that other players can see this shield burst restore cooldown timer, and may take the opportunity to focus fire on ships and destroy them before their shields are restored. The TEC only get access to a weaker shield burst effect quite late into their technology tree, and will be fighting much of the game without it. The Vasari Exodus do not have access to shield burst, while the Vasari Alliance can eventually attain this technology, albeit in a weaker form than the Advent. However, both Vasari factions exclusively have the ability to regenerate shields while engaged in combat. Note that certain weapons, like the Vasari's phase missile technology, have a chance to bypass shields completely. When shields fail, it's down to a ship's armour to protect the hull from damage. Armour is the most effective type of hit point in the game, as we'll see when we look at damage mitigation mechanics shortly. For now, just know that it's the second line of defence for most ships, and once that is depleted, incoming damage is applied directly to a ship's hull points. Armour can be repaired out of combat, but Vasari capital ships can access a ship item to regenerate armour in the midst of a firefight. Overall, the TEC are famous for their heavily armoured ships and excellent armour technology, and can be very difficult to take down in a battle. With the exception of capital ships, titans and starbases, once a ship's shields and armour are completely depleted, it begins to take damage to its superstructure, and only its hull points remain. Once these hull points reach 0, the ship will explode and its crew will be killed. Once incoming damage begins to reduce hull points too much, consider evacuating that ship out of combat so it can live to fight another day. For the largest war machines in Sins of a Solar Empire 2, there's a 4th level of hit point based defense, the crippled hull status. Once a capital ship, titan or starbase's hull points reach 0, they become mostly deactivated and a last form of hit point is depleted, representing the critical infrastructure of a large ship or base. A capital ship or titan in crippled status will be able to muster just enough engine power to try to evacuate the battlefield, but cannot fire nor use any special abilities. At this point, their contribution towards a battle is effectively over, aside from providing a tempting target for enemy ships still engaged with the rest of your fleet. Use this crippled hull status time to get your ship out of combat and back to a safe location. It's important to note that crippled hull is a very undesirable status. While it does give your largest ships one extra chance of survival, repairing all that damage is a long and slow process, and they're going to be out of the game for quite some time. It's also quite easy for an undefended ship in crippled status to become the target of focus fire by an enemy fleet and be destroyed forever. So don't throw your capital ships and titans into risky situations unless you have some plan to extricate them if the battle turns against you. In a closely fought battle, the decision whether to merely drive off crippled ships or attempt to permanently remove them from the game becomes an exciting and potentially battle-deciding choice, as your limited firepower must be carefully assigned where it is most needed. Note that with the exceptions mentioned above, damage to all kinds of defensive system must be repaired outside of combat. Remember, capital ship crews get more effective the longer they survive and the more kills they rack up, and so you'll want to keep veteran ships alive to make the best use of that experience bonus. Cycling your ships in and out of combat as they become damaged is an essential strategy in winning wars, and it's wise to ensure that your fleets have an escape route planned, so that critically damaged ships can repair safe from enemy fire. There are two forms of damage reduction, and for the sake of brevity must be discussed rather briefly. Durability is calculated first, and following that, armour strength. Each ship has a flat value durability rating that reduces incoming damage values against all hit point types, whether shield, armour, hull point or crippled hull point. Bigger and better defended ships tend to have higher durability. Durability is directly countered by the pierce value of incoming weapons damage, and, generally speaking, the higher the pierce value of a weapon, the more damage it applies to shields, armour, and both types of hull point damage. Next up is armour strength. This is a second damage reduction modifier that applies to armour only, with better armoured ships having higher values. When a weapons system hits armour, incoming damage is reduced by durability minus the weapon's pierce value first, and then a second reduction to this new value is then made by armour strength. The exact calculation for this is a little more complex, and you can find it in the description to this video. What's important to note is that ships with a lot of armour strength and high armour points can tank a lot of damage, and generally require very specialised weaponry with high pierce values to tackle in an effective way. As you'll see, armour is the most effective damage reduction type, but is slower and more difficult to regenerate than shields are. Each ship has a number of weapon systems aboard, often with several weapons available in each type. These weapon systems target an individual ship and fire their munitions off at that one target, intending to hit it. The nature of each weapon usually makes it effective for a specific job, such as hitting a certain class of ship or breaking through a specific defensive system type. Most ships have more than one weapon system, and combined with their own defences and special abilities, ensures each ship has a role in the fleet that it is more or less suited towards. There are 4 stats to examine on a weapon: the amount of this type of weapon on the ship, the weapon type, the damage per second or DPS value of a single weapon in that type, and the weapon's pierce value. There are many types of weapon in the game, and aside from missiles, the type mostly determines which techs upgrade its performance. For example, the Visari's beam streaming tech will enhance the performance of all beam weapons on any ships in their fleets. Damage per second is self-explanatory, but it's important to note that this number represents the DPS of just a single weapon of that type on the ship. So, each of the Coal Battleship's 2 Gauss cannons individually have a DPS of 13.4. The reasoning for separating the DPS per weapon, and not just combining them together as a total DPS for all weapons of that type on the ship, is that they're not always linked to fire together and may be placed on different sides of a ship with non-intersecting firing arcs. You cannot guarantee that 2 or more weapons can be brought to bear on the same target, and so it's important to study a ship to see where each weapon points and understand its firing arcs. Finally, we've already discussed how the pierce value of a weapon system is deducted from the durability of the ship receiving damage when determining the damage done to that defensive system type. Again, a higher pierce value will generally do more damage to higher durability ships. Missiles differ from the other weapon types in that their ammunition travels slowly and have their own physics system that allows them to be evaded by faster ships and destroyed by point defense fire, area of effect special abilities, or shot down by faster, lighter missiles. They can even be blocked by other ships positioning themselves as a shield between the aggressor ship and its intended target. Missiles come in several sizes, with the larger models doing more damage, with higher pierce values, more hit points and slower flight speed. Smaller missiles are more suitable for targeting faster moving ships like corvettes and frigates, which can evade the larger missiles completely. Some weapons platforms such as capital ships, titans and starbases are capable of firing off powerful weapons with a large area of effect. The Trader's Flak Burst capital ship item is one example, primarily designed to damage and destroy strike craft and missiles in an area around the firing ship. These abilities can be earned by a capital ship, titan or starbase and obtained as the ship levels up, or purchased and installed as capital ship items. Generally speaking, smaller weapon systems tend to have better tracking for hitting smaller, faster but less well protected ships like corvettes and frigates, which can easily evade the slower tracking of larger and more damaging weapons with higher pierce values. Corvettes are always lightly defended and rely on their rapid circular movement patterns to avoid enemy firing arcs and missiles, and they are best targeted with smaller, fast-tracking weapons. Frigates do not move so quickly, but are generally better armed and armoured than corvettes are. Larger, slower and more durable classes such as cruisers, capital ships and titans have a harder time evading enemy fire and rely on shields, armour, high durability, higher armour strength and large hull point pools to keep them alive. Some of these are better suited to destroying corvettes and frigates, while others are more effective at killing cruisers. Each faction has at least one dedicated capital ship killer, often a cruiser of some kind like the Vasari's Volrak Penetrator and its super heavy beam as shown here. These kinds of ships utilise weaponry with heavy damage and higher pierce values, intended to penetrate the very high durability of the biggest capital ships, titans and starbases. These capital ship hunters are unable to effectively target smaller classes, and can get in some trouble facing swarms of corvettes, strikecraft and other ships they cannot easily track, and will require protection from such threats. Other ships are great at defending the fleet from strikecraft and missiles, such as the Vasari's Junsarak Warden or the trader's Garda Flak frigate, and can be incredibly effective when defending against fleets deploying a lot of bombers and long-range missile-firing ships. As you can see, it will be important to bring a healthy mix of ship types to a battle, as each ship has its counter, and cunning players will utilise their ships to find weaknesses in the composition of their enemies' fleets. Building different fleet loadouts for different purposes will be crucial to keeping your enemies on their toes, and we encourage you to experiment with the ships available in Sins 2 to see what works best for you.